Welcome, Laksh Raghavan, to this Journey Dialogues. I am deeply grateful to you for making this time for this spontaneous conversation that we are about to have, the wild journey.
Hey, Hemant, thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor, and I really look forward to our conversation.
Great. Laksh, I was really intrigued. So I'm not much of a LinkedIn. I go to LinkedIn, I learn a lot on LinkedIn. And I'm deeply thankful to people like you who write prolifically and you reflect on a lot of things. So, when I came across your posts, it really helped me a lot, clear up some of my thinking. But for starters, for the guests who are not aware of you, it would be interesting to get some kind of a semblance around how did you start off in your professional journey, and when did this turn towards this whole systems thinking and complexity take for you? If you can take us through that.
Sure. So I was born and raised in India, and I started out as a developer at a security product company back in India. And so I've been within the information security, cybersecurity domain my entire professional life. And I kind of moved on from that role to do a bunch of consulting gigs across the globe. And as a high-flying consultant, anywhere from a 2-week pen test to a 6-month, application security program, implementation, design, whatever. But the first 8 years or so was that. And that left me really ungratified because I had no clue what happens to my recommendations when rubber meets the road. What were the long-term implications? I really wanted to take that accountability and to learn lessons from it. And so that's exactly what I did by spending the next 11 years at PayPal in various leadership roles, but primarily focused on product security. And so I got really obsessed about how do you solve complex security problems in large corporations. And that's where my passion is. That's where I started. But then that eventually became it's at PayPal where I got exposed to systems thinking and complexity and things of that nature. And it quickly became very clear to me that it's really not a security problem that needs to be solved because problems are just abstractions. And that really, kind of opened up my thinking and horizon. And that really led me to leadership because, that is the key aspect of what lever do you pull to make sure that not just security problems, but every other problem that we see can be addressed and managed, not necessarily solved. And so from from PayPal, I moved on to LinkedIn and spent the last 2.5 years. I'm actually between 2 jobs now, and very happy to be chatting with you at this point.
Yeah, great, Laksh. It would be interesting to get some nuance around, sometimes we all as human beings have a lot of implicit learning in us. And it's very, very difficult sometimes to explicate things in terms of step functions that, this happened and this happened. But did you ever reflect on what were the key moments or key events that really made you focus and concentrate on systems thinking, complexity thinking? And as you mentioned, problems are more of an abstraction and they stand in for a bunch of things. Would you want to nuance on that?
Yeah, I don't think it was just one moment or one aha moment or epiphany. It was basically multiple events because many times we just go through life reacting to events, the proverbial tip of the iceberg. That's what most leaders end up doing. You fight the fire on an everyday basis. But then when you are at the same corporation for a long, long time, you can actually go back and self-reflect on, hey, wait, did we not have this crisis several years ago? Why are we back to square one again? Why are we fighting the same crisis again and again and again? And so I think that really opens up things. Again, with systems thinking, it's not just one book that cuts it for anybody, right? It's the most important part of reading is thinking. And only when you like close the book and then start thinking about the implications of what the insights from the books are and really go interdisciplinary, you cut across different fields and connect the dots, only then you kind of really become more aware of systems thinking. And as you rightly put it, and I think it was Checkland who said that you can even, I'm obviously paraphrasing him, it's a new way to teach thinking is much more difficult than teaching substantive facts about, you know, different topics and things like that. And so that is part of the struggle. If it was easy to teach systems thinking, you know, it would be mainstream already, right? Like, you know, I would say it's way easier to become, you know, to attain the wisdom of the Buddha. It's easier to become the Buddha, but it's incredibly hard to come up with a teaching methodology and a training framework with which you can teach others so that they also can become the Buddha. Even the Buddha failed at that. And so I am always humbled by, you know, as the island of your knowledge grows, so does the perimeter of your ignorance. And so the more you learn, I know how much I don't know. But at the same time, I'm also struggling to teach what I know. And many others are with me in the journey, as you can see on LinkedIn and in the Systems Thinking Network within LinkedIn. We're all on this journey together.
Interesting, interesting. It reminds me of Umberto Eco's anti-library.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
For someone, Laksh, who's not yet primed into this kind of thinking and practice that you are practicing almost on a daily basis, and maybe it's become a second nature, or maybe it's a reflective nature for you. How can one begin to introduce people towards systems thinking? Are there any particular ways in which it has helped you, or it helps you when you're talking to your colleagues?
Yeah, I think there are multiple parts to your question. So let me address the teaching part of it. Look, we're all trained analytical thinkers from our schooling, from college, the way we operate in corporations, in our jobs, whether it's government or private, or we operate as analytical thinkers, so much so that we use analysis and thinking interchangeably. But we must first understand the difference between what analysis and synthesis is. Analysis works, you know, it's rooted in reductionism, as in you take a whole system, you break it into parts, and you analyze each part to see how it works. And when you put that all together, somehow you're supposed to have an understanding of the whole system. It works really well for mechanistic systems like a machine, but doesn't work for complex systems like a corporation where humans are involved. And so synthesis is the opposite of analysis, basically putting things together, looking at the interactions between the parts and what emergent phenomenon does it bring about, and how does that change your explanation and your approach to how things work. And so teaching that, I think we have to go back and redo our education system within codes. There are some experiments going on right now in terms of how we change our teaching methodologies and so on and so forth. And of course, those experiments are, you know, you have to pay for it. I'm sure there are, you know, experiments within other countries that's going on that may be free for, you know, lesser privileged and developing nations and whatnot. But you know, I have my daughter enrolled in a couple of those experiments to see how she can, you know, get this from childhood. But I think a complete transformation of our education system is one thing that we seriously have to consider in terms of inculcating this new way of thinking to everybody.
Interesting. It's interesting that you mentioned that. And if I am understanding you right, you're not saying no to analysis and you're not saying no to reductionism, but what you're saying is that's not the whole thing, and that's not always the case, especially in systems which involves humans in the social system.
Yes.
That's where its applications are.
I'm not dissing on analysis. Let's be very clear for the record. Analysis and analytical thinking gave rise to analytical sciences like physics and chemistry. And ever since the dawn of the scientific revolution, look where we are. And so we've sent a man to the moon, and we've conquered nuclear physics, and so on and so forth. And so analysis is powerful, but you need to understand which domains it's applicable and which domains it's not applicable. And how do you put that together to come up with the right explanations and right approaches to tackle the mess that we're in?
Right. And I'm just beginning to start reading a little bit about systems thinking a little bit about complexity thinking. So I may be very early to somebody like you or some other practitioners, but something that I've come across, and let me see what you how it speaks to you, Laksh. So I came across some of the works of people like Ralph Stacey and Chris Mowles, who believe that because the fundamental nature of complexity itself, it does not offer itself for modeling and taming, as people say, taming the complexity. And then there are other schools that talk about, like the Dave Snowden school, or some other school, they talk about tinkering and sensing and experimenting and trying to see what can work and then amping it up, sort of thing. And I'm right now open, and I'm just I'm doing my own set of experiments and trying to learn. But would you want to speak to something like that?
Yeah. So let me start with the TLDR answer to that. The TLDR answer to that is prescriptions are for the unserious. I think I have a LinkedIn post about it. We can dig that up. But I think when we give people methodologies and tools and frameworks, we're so caught up in using them. And we forget the underlying first principles and the philosophy that explains to us why we have to do what we have to do, right? And a good explanation of the entire universe is across multiple disciplines anyway. And so if you learn a single discipline of complexity or system sciences, and maybe Snowden's framework or Agile or SAFe or like any of those methodologies and frameworks, it's my humble opinion that you'll end up in the trap of trying to fit everything into that framework and look at the worldview. Your worldview will be dependent on that. Instead, what I would rather do is, I think, work your way up from first principles. Understand the insights from human psychology and human nature, keeping in mind that a vast majority of psychology papers are not reproducible. Insights from cybernetics, and more importantly, the second order implications of cybernetics, complexity, systems, and not just that. Physics. You can cut across multiple disciplines, but we also need a coherent and a consistent philosophy, especially of epistemology and ontology. You can't separate them both. And kind of put that together, as Charlie Munger calls it, a lattice work to hang your ideas. So once you build your worldview from those first principles rooted in the right epistemology, then that gives you a completely new approach. And you can look at everything from that perspective and continuously iterate on building. Like, we have to get better at map making, and you continue to work on that. And that's the journey I think we should all be on. And so where systems thinking comes into the picture is it not only erases the boundaries between the points of view that define the sciences, like physics, chemistry, biology, and like we read them separately, right? It not only erases that, but it also erases the boundary between science and humanities. And I think that's the key aspect of systems thinking.
Wonderful, wonderful, Laksh. I hear continuous learning. I hear continuous experimentation, iteration, and not getting caught, into the maps for the territory. And it was interesting. You mentioned a few things that I'm myself not very aware of. It will be helpful for me and people who will view this. How would you help us understand second order cybernetics thing? Are there anything initially that one can that you would like to introduce us?
Yeah,
in
absolutely. So the first order cybernetics is all about like systems. Like there's multiple definitions and descriptions, and there's so many books about it. So instead of going into that, I think what we can do is explain what second order cybernetics is at a high level, and then view complexity from that standpoint, and see what it means. And so second order cybernetics is all about observing systems, which is us. And so when you as an observer come into the picture, whether as a leader in a corporation or even for scientific experiments, there's always that bias and other things that you bring to the table, right? There is no observation without an observer. And so there's a lot of existing books and discourse about complexity, starting from James Lovelock, Stuart Kauffman, Ilya Prigozhin. But what I do want to talk about is, and what's ignored in the mainstream discourse, is the second order implications. And so complexity is a description and not a property of the phenomenon itself. Therefore, it's dependent on the observer, right? Even for things that are impossible to predict, the so-called black swan events, there's always information asymmetry, right? And to the viewers that don't know what black swan events are, Nassim Nicholas Talat's work is something that I would recommend. A simple example that's given is usually the example of the Thanksgiving turkey, right? What the turkey saw its entire life for 363 days or whatever is a benevolent, loving farmer feeding it food and taking care of it. But one fine day, like just before Thanksgiving, the butcher just cuts it off. And so it was a surprise only for the turkey, but not for the butcher. And so there's always information asymmetry there. And so to me, complexity is the domain of nonlinearity and surprise. It's a domain where you cannot establish cause and effect. And a corporation is a complex socio-technical system. And so I am deeply interested in the complexity that arises at the intersection of humans and technology. And that's why I'm deeply passionate about leadership as a discipline and what we can learn from it and apply that in our day-to-day work.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, Laksh, for articulating it so well. Thank you so much. And I think if I heard and understood what you were sharing is that we could be each other's black swan. Right? We could be just trying to stump each other in some sense, because I would have some information that you do not have, and I may want to use it and game you in some way or manipulate you in some way. So that could be one way in which this information asymmetry could exist and be utilized. Would you agree to that?
I'm not sure if I would frame it the way you would frame it, because reality within quotes out there, what's out there, it's nobody can get close to reality, right? All we can do is provide descriptions from our perspective. And so the reality out there is just all of our different perspectives affecting our behavior, which in turn affects each other's behavior. And so therein, there comes the complexity of things. And so, and as a society, we've always, paid people for specialized knowledge. Look at doctors, plumbers, dentists, and so on. They all have specialized knowledge. They have information that you don't. They have skills that you don't. And so even for even in the global financial crisis of the 2008, Michael Burry made a killing with, because he knew this was coming, right? And so society is always rewarded, whether you call it good or bad, of information asymmetries. So that's what we all like. And the more we share, the more conversations we have, I think the better it is. Like, at least from a leadership and managing corporations perspective, I think Churchman's approach of, I think I'm trying to paraphrase him again, like systems approach begins when you are able to view the world from the other person's perspective, right? And so all of our perspectives are different, and there is no substitute for conversations.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you for synthesizing this, whatever I was brewing in my comprehension. Building on what you mentioned, and again, you can tell me if I'm on course on this. There is some kind of information asymmetry. Like, even as I speak with you right now, there is information asymmetry, and per se, information asymmetry may or may not be good, so long as how we use it or channelize it, and then the ethics with which we channelize it.
Yes.
And it reminds me a little bit about Adam Smith, when he talked about division of labor. This seems to me like division of cognitive labor, division of expertise. That can be, if a right kind of marketplace or coordination place and right kind of competition exists, it can help each other in a better way. Would you agree with that kind of framing, Laksh?
Yeah, I think in a way, free market capitalism is trying to do just that, right? And there is an evolutionary elimination at play, where good ideas survive and bad ideas and bad companies that's built on those ideas get destroyed. And so, again, to your point, a lot of our knowledge is embodied, and we cannot verbalize all the knowledge that we carry. And even when I try to verbalize things, I am carrying a lot more context that underpins that, and there's a lot more context that underpins that, and so on and so forth. And so Heinz von Foerster, I think, was the one who said, it is the listener that determines the meaning of an utterance, not the speaker. And so again, that's a second order implication. And so I can say whatever I want, but you're going to interpret it the way you interpret it. And so going back and forth and asking deeper questions and having those deep conversations is very, very critical, even more so in a corporation. And unfortunately, many of us just don't have time. We just go from one meeting to another, like 30 minutes, 1 hour slots. But these type of deep philosophical conversations that can get to a much better understanding of our incentives, why we do the things that we do, and can we reimagine a future that's completely different from where we are today, that takes deep conversations. And that's why I'm a big fan of deep conversations. And the minute you reached out, like, I always engage and have these conversations. And so once again, like, thank you for inviting me on. Like, these are deep conversations that we must have as a society.
Interesting. It's interesting you invoked the word that which is accessible to us, that which can be expressed, that which I can perceive and make sense of. All of this is an intermesh with something that is embodied in some way. Context, there is context to it. Does this hint towards a new wave of cognition that at least I have been trying to track, which is called as the 4E cognition and the 4P cognition, which is the a school that talks about embedded cognition, embodied cognition, enacted cognition, and extended cognition. So what they're really saying is, as you pointed out, cognition is not in this domain which can be verbalized and exchanged, but there is a lot happening below this, which is embodied, as you already pointed out. Extended would be something like this pen is an extended cognition. A lot of cognition has gone to create this. And embedded would be embedded in rules and norms in some sense. So could this be a case of cognition now going, the cognitive science now looking at systemic applications of cognition or framing of cognition?
I think I'm not familiar with the 4E framework that you talked about, but we can come up with many, like humans, we like to categorize things, right? We like our buckets of, hey, this is this category, that these are just descriptions that we provide, but reality as it exists is interdisciplinary. But one thing that I want to touch upon is from a psychology perspective, is that much of our decision-making apparatus is opaque to us, and we have to take that into account, and we just don't. We view a lot of things from the traditional economic sense, wherein value can be created only by objectively making the product better or cheaper. And I disagree with that worldview. And I think the Austrian School of Economics provides a much better explanation of what we need to do, and really jives well with the systems thinking aspects. And I can get into a couple of case studies that Rory Sutherland talks about, which is, let me start with the first one, which is Eurostar, the train that goes between, I think, London and Paris. The train takes about 3 hours, 20 minutes or something like that. Of course, I'm misremembering the numbers. And I think they spent about 6 billion with a B euros to reduce the travel time by 40 minutes. So, and the real question to ask is, is that really required? Because look, I really enjoy traveling on the train compared to having to fly on a plane, because you have to get early to the airport, go through TSA, people hate that, and so do I. And when you're sitting in an airport, something like in an airplane, something or the other keeps happening, right? You have to listen to the safety precautions, you have to buckle up, and going to you cannot walk around, you cannot sit down, there's no Wi-Fi available for free, and so on and so forth. And so what Rory Sutherland asked was, hey, for the 1% of that expensive 6 billion budget, you could have installed free high-speed Wi-Fi, and people could actually get work done on the train. And jokingly, just to make the point, he said, forget 6 billion, give me $1 billion, and I would hire the top supermodels of the world, both male and female, walking up and down the train, serving Chateau Patrice for free to everybody, and everybody would be begging to slow down the train. And so, right? And so this notion of time is absolutely subjective. And he also talks about another example of a call center where a simple addition of one line saved the expenditure of a multi-million-dollar project. And so this was like I think it was like an insurance claims kind of a call center where people call in for claims, and there was a huge call volume of people complaining, hey, my checks are not on time. And so they were going to invest multiple $1 billion to increase call center capacity, improve their back office processes and things like that. And what they finally realized is that, look, what is the best we can do given the current infrastructure? How quickly can we get the checks to our customers? And it was like 10 days. And so what they did was finally, when you call in for the claim, they added one sentence. They said, you will get your check in 14 days or 2 weeks, something like that. So you set the expectation there, and then all of those calls just completely disappeared. There were actually a few calls trickling in, but they were to say, hey, thank you for sending my check early. I got it within 10 days. You said it would take 14 days. And so perception of time is very subjective. And there are a couple of more examples that I want to get into the tech world. Maybe we can do that.